No, now that you mentioned it.
Hi everyone, you're watching the LCO discussion. I'm joined here by our first three LCO candidates of the evening. Would you like to introduce yourselves?
My name is Afaz Yunus. I am the candidate for International Student Officer. I grew up in Dubai. I'm originally Bangladeshi by ethnicity. I'm a clinical law student. Before this, I did 1 year of university in the US. Pretty much been doing student politics for as far as I can remember. I've been in leadership positions since grade 1. So yeah, I cover a political family as well. So advocacy, representation, it's been something that I've been doing for a while now.
Hi, I'm Millie Ashton. I'm a second year history and philosophy student. I'm running for Wins Plus. I'm so passionate about kind of making campus a safer space for everyone, about increasing education, increasing like kind of discussions about consent. And I'm a die-hard feminist, so yeah.
I'm Pavan. I'm a first year psychology student. I'm also a JCR Exec Equalities and Opportunities Officer for County College. I'm a psychology student ambassador. I'm a National Autistic Society Young Ambassador, and I'm also an advisor for the Department for Education around supporting disabled students. I'm so passionate about inclusion. I'm so passionate about advocacy. I want to tackle cost of living constraints for disabled students. I want to tackle student mental health and how much it's a real problem that students aren't able to access mental health support at Lancaster. And I also want to make sure that staff at the university are trained on supporting neurodivergent students. I'm also the winner of JCR Officer of the Year last year.
Right, and we also have some LCO candidates who, unfortunately, due to scheduling conflicts, couldn't make it today. We have Kanak Mavani, who's running for International Officer, who can't be here. Sarah Rader, who's also a candidate for International Students Officer, who can't be here, as well as Charlie and Em, who are running for Disabilities Officer and couldn't make it either. But let's jump right into the question. So we've seen that the number of candidates who've run for FTO positions has improved massively this year compared to last. We've gone from 8 candidates for 6 roles to 17 for 4 roles. But the number of people who are running for LCO positions is still quite low. Even with nominations being extended, 3 of the 6 roles have no candidates at all. Why don't you think people want to run for LCO?
Well, if I start off with this one, it's I've asked my friends and people around campus the same question. So, for example, the role that I'm running for, right? It's not a role to be taken lightly, right? International students, we constitute for a big portion of the student population of Lancaster. I believe it was 24% or something, and we bring in so much revenue to this university, right? We pay significantly more than home students, right? And we bring in our talents, we bring in our skills and everything, but we are not represented properly. It's because I feel like a lot of people don't take this role with passion, nor do they take this role to make a change or do something, but it's mostly related to do with the CV. And once they have gotten into the position, right, they just don't represent us well enough. And like when there's that, right, people think that there's nothing to do with this role, so people do not care enough. So I feel like when a right person takes on this role, right, and we actually advocate and represent our designated population properly as LCOs, I feel like people will be more passionate about this role, and people will see that, okay, you know what, this role actually does exist, and there is certain responsibilities allocated with it that need to be carried out for a good and thriving student population.
I mean, kind of speaking more specifically about Women's Plus, I think a reason a lot of people aren't running for Women's Plus is because I think it's quite intimidating as a woman to kind of want to run into kind of like student government or into a leadership position, especially when there is kind of like this lackluster of female leaders on campus. If I was to get Women Plus, I really would like to kind of encourage like Women Plus identities, kind of gain the skills to be in leadership positions, get some like leadership speakers and some motivational speakers, and just kind of improve kind of like awareness that even if you are a woman, you can run in these kind of positions.
I'm a JCR Exec Officer, and I think that visibility of the LCO roles is a big struggle because there are 6 LCO roles in total, and as a JCR officer, I work closely with the student union, so I'm meant to know pretty much everyone who works in the student union, but in reality I know all the FTOs, and I only know who the students with disabilities officers are. I don't know any of the other LCOs, so I think that visibility is a big struggle. I also believe that with the students with disabilities role, it can be quite demanding because some disabled students may struggle with energy regulation and energy levels, and it's almost like you have to be on top of it always. And I personally am quite good at balancing out my work life, my social life, my JCR exec life, and I am also someone who does enjoy being quite busy and who would rather be busy than doing nothing. So, but other disabled students may not be the same. So for some, that time where they do nothing and that they have a break and that they relax actually really matters to them. So that's probably why some disabled students may not actually want to run for the role.
Well, you bring up a pretty good point, which is that it is a big responsibility. It's quite a big job. You know, I'd imagine it can be quite exhausting. I know that at some universities, I believe at Lancaster in the past, they've got a system like FTOs, full-time officers, and PTOs, part-time officers, who might get paid not a lot of cash, but a little bit of cash, which reflects the work which they put in as effectively working part-time on top of their degree, compared to the full-time officers who take a sabbatical year or they've already graduated. Do you think that making this at least something of a paid role would help, or would that just get the wrong sorts of people to be applying for roles, do you think?
To be honest, that's a tough one to answer, because I mean, here's the thing, regardless of the payment or not, like leadership should be something that comes with passion, right? You shouldn't be doing it for payment regardless. You should be doing it to represent a population, to represent the people that are voting you in, to work for them, right? So anyway, your main motivation should be working for the people, the satisfaction that you get by bringing in the change and putting a smile on those faces. So if monetary incentive is a factor, that in itself is, to be honest, very saddening. I don't think so that should be a case regardless, and that shouldn't be an incentive in any way whatsoever. And I do think that yes, there might be some people, like, they might just be clumsy about the role but still take it if they're popular enough around campus, have a lot of friends, right? They can just win by popular votes and just not care about the role and just be there because they're getting paid.
I mean, I wholeheartedly agree, to be honest. I feel like kind of having a monetary kind of incentive could maybe like encourage the kind of wrong people to apply, people that do just want to like do it because it looks good on a CV, or because they want the money for it. At the end of the day, these kind of positions need to be passion driven. They need to be led by people who really want to make a difference on campus, because I feel like positive change won't come unless the people behind it are really driving for that change.
Yeah, I totally agree with both of your points. It should be all about passion. I'm a JCR exec officer and I don't get paid for being a JCR exec officer, but I still give my 100% to the role. Why? Passion, the will to want to help the college, to be there for them, to support them. That's what it should be all about. And as a disabilities officer, as a candidate for disabilities officer, I should say, that passion should reflect towards that. It shouldn't be about monetary reward or money or anything like that. It's all about passion, honestly.
Are you all happy with how the university and the students' union at the moment is representing the demographic that you're in the race to represent? Not sure where to start with that one, but...
Well, to be honest, I think with this one I can speak for the entire international community as a whole, right? Not just my own personal opinion, because throughout the whole process of campaigning and even before campaigning, when I had when I pretty much like had the intention of running for this position and I went around, I spoke to my friends about it. No, we're not, because I don't think so. We're getting, like, us international students, we bring in so much culture, so many different beliefs, diversity, so on and so forth, like, but none of them ever get represented. Like, I'll give you one example just to cut it short. We just had Chinese New Year, right? For Chinese New Year, one of the biggest demographic that we have on campus of international students are the Chinese students. What was done for them? did you see any events for Chinese New Year?
No.
I think there was one event, and I had one Chinese friend. He was so excited for this one event, which was in the library, right? To something to do with Chinese, like some drawing related to Chinese culture, and he was so excited just to do that. But Chinese culture is just more than drawing on paper. They have their own dance, they have their own music, right? If we can have Christmas markets, right? If we can have Christmas markets, if we can have fireworks for New Year's, right? Why can we not have something for international students? Like, we are coming here not to lose our cultures, but to integrate, right? Not to lose ourselves, not to lose our identity, right? So, to be honest, no, we are not getting represented the right way. We international students, we deserve a lot more than that.
Before we move along, if we could just ask a question quickly to you specifically. I'm not sure if you saw the clip a couple of weeks ago. The current president of LUSU, Kevis Evans, was on Question Time, and she asked a question to the panel. And part of the question, she talked about, because of the way that universities are funded, they're reliant more and more on international students who pay international fees, which are much, much higher. But there's been concern that they're starting to recruit international students who don't have a good enough level of English that they'll be able to do well in their degree or graduate, but they'll be happy to take their cash to fund the university. Is that something you're concerned about at Lancaster at all?
Of course it is, and what she said is 100% a fact. It is a fact. It is happening. The number of international students on campus who do not speak the language, right? Who do not speak English properly or enough to graduate, it's increasing, right? There are a lot of international students out there who are doing that, and yes, maybe the university is pursuing these international students because the university needs more revenue. But if they're doing that, right? So one of the things in my manifesto, I've given a 19-point manifesto, out of which in the past, in my university in the US, I was the president of International Student Organization, senator of student government, chair of the entire university's infrastructure committee. Out of my 19-point manifesto, I've delivered on 15 of my promises. And one of the promises that I've made in my manifesto and which I've delivered in the US is having a a cross-language program, right? So if the university is actually going to do this, then we should actually have programs on campus where we teach these students how to speak English, and if not just that, they also get the opportunity to teach us about their language, and like that, like it's not just them getting into the British culture, but as well as them also giving something to this country, a bit of their culture, a bit of their language. So yes, that is happening.
And how are we feeling about the way that the SU and the university are treating women at the university and disabled students?
From my opinion, I don't think women are being represented enough at this university. I feel like when it's Women's History Month, we get a few kind of like posts about inspirational women who are leaders, but kind of beyond that, there's very, very little. I feel like as well, like women's problems just aren't getting addressed on campus. What I've written about in my manifesto, and I wholeheartedly believe, is that at Lancaster University, there is a rape culture where women don't feel particularly safe going out, they don't feel safe in societies, they feel very kind of like overshadowed. And I've spoken to a lot of like my friends about this and different kind of women across the university where sexual harassment is very much normalised and they don't feel like they can come forward to the SU, to people on campus. And I feel like the SU needs to do more to show them that women will be supported if they speak out, and that as a university that there's no tolerance for kind of sexual misconduct and sexual violence of any nature. Right now, that isn't happening. Right now, it's very, very little. It's so confusing as to how to get support on campus if you've experienced anything like that. I just feel like as a university, we can do a lot better at representing women and helping them.
And what about disabled students, Per?
I personally don't believe that the university does enough to represent disabled students. For example, Welcome Week, the number of partying, drinking, heavy events totally outnumbers the number of events where actually you could get disabled students together and do something nice, give them a welcoming field. We could have events like that, but the fact that welcome week, it's all partying, it's all drinking culture, it's like not all disabled students want that, like some of them just want to chill quiet environment, but they want to make friends, they want to be included, they don't want to be stuck in their flats during welcome week because of all this partying culture, all this drinking culture. Like, don't get me wrong, I'm a disabled student and I love it, but I'm here to represent all disabled students, and not all disabled students want that and enjoy that. So we need more events that cater for the whole demographic of disabled students during welcome week.
And I mean, on top of that, you've got more and more students at university who don't drink, whether that's for like religious or health reasons, or just because they don't enjoy that kind of occasion. So yeah, I can understand your point about a welcome week, needing to be more inclusive. Now, if we move to maybe like a bit more of an open discussion, have any of you got any like particular points or concerns or things you'd like to address, really?
I mean, there's one thing I think that really needs to be addressed. I don't think so that's being addressed enough, which is, as you mentioned, us international students, we are pursued by universities, not just in Lancaster, right? All over the UK, and not just UK, in fact, US is doing this, Australia is doing this, Canada is doing this. We are getting pursued because we end up paying more, right? I pay 24 grand a year, right? And I heard one of my home student friends tell me that that's basically what he would pay in 3 years, right?
Yeah.
And one misconception that a lot of home students or people of UK.
Oh, so got that bit of a fire alarm going off. Okay, we'll be back as soon as we can. We should probably leave so we don't get set on fire. Sorry,
Go for
Sorry, what?
Yeah, got my mic back on. Oh, wait. Give me 2 seconds. Right, as we were saying before we were so rudely interrupted, where were we actually? I've completely lost my train of thought.
Oh, that's fine. The discussion was so good, the building caught fire. But, so basically, as I was trying to address this one point, which is definitely not discussed enough, that's because like there's this misconception when it comes to like international students is that like since we pay a lot more tuition fees, everyone sorts of things that okay, you know what, like they're solvent enough, like, but you know, ever since this cost of living crisis, it's not just affecting United Kingdom. It's what we are facing is pretty much a global recession, right? And every country out there is facing this, right? And you need to realize something, which is that pound in general is a very strong currency, right? So let me give you one example, right? I want to like one of the countries that is being affected, and we have a good amount of those students over here is, for example, Pakistan, right? £1 is 360 Pakistani rupees. 360 Pakistani rupees, right? And now imagine, do your maths, imagine £22,000 times 360. And I think like anyone who reads global news pretty much knows about the economy of Pakistan, and post-COVID it hasn't gotten any better.
And
right?
of course, the average salary in Pakistan will be lower, equivalent in pounds, than it would be here.
Yes. So this cost of living crisis, right, it's not just affecting home students. If anything, it's affecting the international students a lot as well. And we need to address that. We need to do something about that. And this is something that, in fact, now, whether I get elected or not, I don't know, right? We'll find out. But whoever gets elected, right, my piece of advice to Karen, if I get elected, I'll 110% do this. But whoever gets elected afterwards, one of the plans that I have, there is a subcommittee under the International Students Officer, which is known as the International Students Forum. I want there to be an ISF fund done by when we do events for international students. The money that generates from that event, a portion of that should go into ISF funds. By that, which we can help international students, because you do not realize the number of international students, because it's not just the economy that has taken a hit, it has also the banking sectors have taken a hit worldwide. Sending money from one end of the world to the other is not as easy as it was before COVID. Before COVID, maybe you would have taken 1 day, 2 days. Now it takes up to 5-7 days. The number of international students that have, you know, like that run out of money and pretty much have to ask their friends for money, right? I have personally given so many of my friends money, right? Because they run out of money and like their parents are not being able to send that money. Either the currency rate is up or everything along the lines of that.
And so, of course, if you've got a sudden financial emergency as well, you know, if it takes you 5 or 7 days, because if I had suddenly got a big expense, I can text my parents and I'll have cash in my bank account literally instantly.
That's the thing. So that's the reason why, to address this point, my solution that I came up with is this something which I call the International Students Forum Fund, right? Where from the events that we will be doing, right, we'll be, you know, gradually like collecting money over there, and so that any amount that we can help international students with, or anyone in general, right, like £100, £200, like whatever we could get, depending on how much money we can generate, right? I think that'd be great, because to be honest, this cost of living crisis it's not just home students, it's also international students. And if anything, home students actually, they call this home, they have family here. International students, first of all, they're very alone. They're away from the family, right? We are supposed to be creating an environment where they can find a new family, where they can find a new home. That's the reason why my motto for this election is making Lancaster home away from home, right? So them being already so alone and by themselves, being away from family, going through all of this, I think this does need to be addressed. And I would like to thank LA1 TV for giving us this platform where I could raise this.
Of course. Thank you. Yeah, I think if we start to move towards our closing thoughts, I know time's been disrupted a little bit by our fire alarm there. So if anyone else has some last thoughts, maybe.
I mean, just kind of one thing that the reason I'm really running for Women's Plus is what I've kind of touched on before this, is that at Lancaster University there is a rape culture, there is kind of language being used, there is kind of this like misogynistic language that kind of like almost condones or normalises sexual misconduct. And if I get Women's Plus officer, I really want to tackle this head on. I want to implement consent workshops across all societies and really elevate women's voices, that they can speak out if something has happened to them. So yeah, that's how I want to run.
Yeah. I also want to have a closing thought on how the cost of living crisis is affecting disabled students. Not all disabled students are able to get personal independence payment, and not all disabled students are able to get disabled students allowance, which means that they don't have that extra money to be able to fund the needs, the adjustments that they need to get. I personally, me having OCD, which is a mental illness, I need an ensuite room, and I don't get any sort of discount whatsoever to get her to between an ensuite room and a standard room, even though I need that ensuite room. Right now it's £154 a week, and it's not been refurbished in years, and it's in a poor state, and I literally cannot afford that, and I need that room, and because it's a reasonable adjustment, yet I don't get any discounts whatsoever. What we need is accessible accommodation for disabled students, for them to get a discount on it. They need to be able to afford to live at uni. Some disabled students have to live only on campus, and right now campus accommodation rates are more expensive in most cases than living in town, and it's not fair on disabled students. So I would like to propose, if I'm elected, number one, a freeze on rents, and number two, discounts for disabled students to be able to live in accessible accommodation but not have to pay those high costs, and for them only to have to pay what is the standard accommodation rent if it weren't an accessible room or if it weren't an ensuite. So this has got to happen.
I'd like to thank you all very, very much for coming on to have a chat. It's been great in spite of our brief evacuation from the studio. I'm sorry to anyone listening who was bothered by the very, very loud fire alarm. I'm not sure how loud it came across on the microphone, but it was very loud here in person. Just to remind you, these are on all of your LCO candidates. You can see all of the manifestos online by visiting lancastersu.co.uk. There'll be a candidates question evening on Monday. That's at 6 p.m. in the County South private dining room. You can come along in person. You can watch the live stream on LA1 TV or on the radio on Bailrigg FM, and you can ask questions to the candidates there. And voting will be open from Tuesday until Thursday next week, which you can also do on the Lancaster SU website. Stay tuned. In a couple of minutes we'll be right back with a debate from the wellbeing candidates. So see you then. I say that, but we still seem to be on the screen.
Vote for Faz Yunus. vote for Fuzz Eunice. I'll take that again.
Okay, I'm here now with our well-being candidates. Well, with two of them, Will Oliver unfortunately couldn't make it to the debate here today. So we have Joe Innes and Ella Smith. So first question for you both. The cost of living crisis, it's hitting the students hard, and obviously that's a big impact on mental and physical health. What do you think the SU should be doing that it's not at the moment to help students?
I think there needs to be an increase in hardship funds. You know, hardship funds do already exist within a lot of colleges and within the Students' Union, but I think currently they're too hard to access and there's not enough money to go around. You know, so many students find themselves in a difficult position financially now that, you know, it needs to become far more accessible, because more students do need the support than, you know, 2 years ago when I started at uni.
I think the cost of living is an interesting conversation when it comes to the Students' Union and its relations with the university. I know the college, like SCRs, have, for example, like food pantries as well as the Students' Union one. And I think if they work together better to like get the word out together instead of working independently, obviously that's not necessarily financially related, but in terms of expanding funding bids, I think more focus should go towards sanitary products. There are obviously supplies available that you can take from the Students' Union and across colleges as well, but more, I just think even so is not enough still. But
I mean, you know, in general, it's a pretty broad role, the job of well-being officer. You know, it encompasses quite a lot, just students being well. It's a big job. What would both of you like to focus on specifically? Have you got your thoughts on the scope of the role? Just, you know.
I think I touched on this a little bit in my interview. I think personally for me, one of my main priorities is the navigation of the wellbeing services. It's such a barrier to students that need the support that exists, but there's so many different portals that they can choose from, and it's hard to know which one to go to. And if you don't know, then you're not keen on doing it in the first place.
We are just in the LCO discussion before. I know that Millie was saying that there can be a problem with reporting sexual misconduct and sexual harassment because there's so many services. It can be quite confusing. I mean, what's your thoughts on this, Joe?
I mean, I want to streamline the resources we have. You know, we already have so many resources available on campus. You have college advisory teams, you have the counselling and mental health service, and you have LUSU advice. I think bringing them together under one banner would really help students, just because there's one area where they can access all of the advice they need. They don't have to go, well, is this what I want to go to, or is it this one? I think just by having the one more streamlined service, it would definitely help students just accessing resources.
Yeah, like, you know,
on that note, I wouldn't say there's enough anonymous reporting available. You can obviously contact Nightline yourself if you need that support, like late at night sort of thing. And I've forgotten the name of it now, but there's the report system for if someone else is in danger or someone else is in harm. Generally more so physical harm than otherwise. And I think there should be more of an anonymous system put in place to flag up some friends even, because if you're not in an exec position, then you don't have the contacts, you don't know where you're supposed to be signposted to.
Yeah, like society execs get their training on safeguarding and welfare, and it can often be, it's quite a lot, it's quite confusing. You do the training once a year, but there's a lot there. Are you satisfied with the way the training works? Could this be something which is streamlined for societies as well to make it a bit easier, you think?
I've done the training as part of as a JCR exec, which I've also had the same training for the newspaper exec as well. And they are the same thing, and that's completely fine. But it should be better bridge between what you know from that training and where you're supposed to go to afterwards. So you know how to handle the situations, and you know that if it gets serious, you're supposed to report them higher. But there's not much difference between the different scenarios. So it says, oh, if someone's being bullied, you do this and that, and that's fine. But as soon as it gets more serious than that, it's like, oh, just report them to a higher officer. And that's, again, is fine because the student leaders shouldn't be dealing with that themselves.
I feel that it's an issue where we do need to look at and review the training, because a lot of the training, particularly training received as JCR or for being a welcome rep, was made in 2019. And the fact is that it's now outdated. Since then you've had the pandemic, and it's been, at least 5 years now. And in that time, so much has changed on a societal level that we do really need to review it. And I think it's an area where, from my experience of having done it for JCR and for a society exec, the majority of it was based around, you know, safe consumption of alcohol. It was what to do if someone passes out in a pub, or, you know, who do you call if someone's got a problem on campus. It's not actually about, you know, if someone has got a mental health issue, where do you send them to?
Well, yeah, like, you know, in my experience being on the exec at Bailrigg FM, the training there, you know, a lot of it is talking quite abstractly about safeguarding and reporting duties, and then, yeah, like you say, it gets into more specifics, quite often around alcoholic socials and things like how many sober people to how many drunk people, and it's different on or off campus, which, you know, is perfectly good, but it's a funny place for that to be the one bit that really gets specifics. Like, you know, right, I'll jump onto a bit of a different topic here. I think a big part of the job of wellbeing officer is you're kind of not in charge of, but you're chatting with and liaising with the LCOs. Is that an aspect of the job which you're looking forward to? How are you both, you know, planning on approaching that?
I mean, having been VP Welfare in County, you know, it's something which I do to an extent already. You know, we talk amongst ourselves as like a JCR, you know, about events. So, you know, if we're planning, say, an event for Easter, you know, we'll work together and go, well, you know, socials will take, you know, planning of the event, and then welfare, you know, we'll pitch in and do like what we're going to do on the welfare point, you know, what's the sober duty going to be, what's stuff like that going to be. And then similarly with like welfare campaigns, it's about working with your equalities and opportunities officers, your international and faith officer, and then your welfare officers to make sure that, you know, we've got enough campaigns and that we're doing plenty of stuff, so that not only do people feel like they can come and talk if they've got an issue, but also then, like, for big things like student pride, we have an event ready for that, and just making sure that everyone feels comfortable and confident. And in many ways I see doing the same thing with the forums and with the LCOs. It's about helping them have a platform to really raise their concerns, raise their issues, and raise their campaigns.
I think my experience in Lonsdale as well, by the sounds of it, is similar, where I had the international welfare role, and as part of that hosted my own events, and I've invited loads of different societies and like exec members to that as well, and actually worked with current LCOs as part of that to curate these different communities and different events where people can come and join us.
And part of the problem that you might have in the role is we currently have 3 LCO roles which have no candidates at all. Now, I'm assuming there'll probably be kind of additional elections or by-elections or whatever you want to call them, probably in the summer term, to try and get people into those roles, because I know we had the same problem last year. But there's the potential that these roles aren't filled, and that would really require you as wellbeing officer to step up. And the roles which have got no candidates, it's regional and ethnic minority officer, postgraduate officer, and LGBTQ plus officer. Those are 3 often very different and very difficult roles to represent. How would you feel about having to step up to really take a more hands-on approach to representing those students?
I think those specific LCO positions, as you said, are quite difficult, because, I mean, obviously I'm a white girl, so I've obviously have no experience within that, and I think more so for ethnic minority than other ones, maybe working with the international officer would work well within that, and the same sort of for LGBTQ plus role with the women's officer would obviously completely different issues, but have some slight similarities to it.
There's at least the degree of overlap with sex and
yes,
gender.
Exactly, that's what I mean.
Yeah, it's kind of the best you've got.
Yeah, exactly.
Joe?
I mean, I definitely look to work with the previous people who've had that position, because they will have a better understanding than I will of the issues that those groups have, those groups of students. But I also would look to work with the forums themselves. You know, just because there isn't an LCO doesn't mean there's not natural leaders within those forums, people who have got lots of experience in the uni, who've potentially been here a bit longer, and who really campaign on those issues. So I want to get involved with them as well, even if they don't hold the title of LCO, but just because they're based in those forums.
See, I'm sure in the process of preparing your campaign, preparing to run, you've both been chatting to a lot of people about student welfare on campus. Has there been anything which has surprised you, any issues which students have raised which you just not considered before, or not thought of as a welfare issue?
I wouldn't say it's surprising, because I've kind of experienced it myself, but once you kind of surpass or like go through the SCR like counselling service, or like talk talks, whatever you have with them, you can be then transferred on to university, like actual counselling service, which is where counsellors come in from the NHS to support students as much as they can, sort of thing. Basically, there's a limit on that, on those amount of sessions you can have. I think it's 6. I might be wrong with that. And that doesn't differ no matter how grave your situation is. So if there's some really serious issues, such as someone feeling suicidal or something like that, whether you've had your 6, like once you're at the end of your 6 sessions, that's obviously most likely not going to be fixed. And they just kind of are, I don't want to say hung out to dry, but not supported through that very much. I think they give out a number to like different helplines that are outside of the university. But
wow, that's quite a lot. That yeah.
Absolutely.
Sure.
I mean, with me, so my experience mainly comes from within sports societies. So having talked to some people who are part of those, one of the issues we came up with was really that a lot of the mental health resources that are within the uni are based sort of away from the sports and society side, because I think people have this assumption that if you're socially active, if you're part of the society, you don't have mental health issues. But I think the truth is that we do still feel a lot of stress. I know for me, playing American football, I do feel a lot of stress, and sometimes I'm not always best at coping with that. And also doing that alongside my degree and alongside everything else, it can be very difficult for students who to deal with stress, and then particularly if they haven't had experience or the training on JCRs or anything like that, they don't actually know where to access resources. Because it's all good having LUSU advice plastered on the electric boards around campus, but a lot of students still don't know these resources exist, or they don't know the best way to actually go around and contact them.
It kind of blends into the background a bit, because you'll see it advertised everywhere, but it doesn't really say anything beyond the fact that it's there. It can be kind of, you see it so much you kind of forget it in a weird way. And I can imagine in sports as well, it's quite a competitive environment in a lot of sports. I can imagine there's kind of those sorts of pressures to just like to suck it up and deal with it, and other kind of approaches to mental health which are not approaches to mental health effectively. I can imagine that must be quite tricky.
Yeah, it can be. I mean, definitely within American football, in the time I've been here, there's been a massive improvement in like mental health resources and just dealing with mental health. It's what we talked about a lot more, but there's still an issue in societies, and it's not just about it being an issue in societies here. I play for a team based in Preston with other adults now, and one of the things that we talked about recently, and that was actually how there isn't any mental health resources. There's no sources available, so people do have issues of sort of like, what do I do? I don't want to contact the NHS because I don't think it's that serious. But I do still have these issues. How do I go about contacting just someone to talk to about it? And that's a discussion I had. And I thought that was really important. It's like, if we get into a position now at university, within university sports, we have a really positive discussion on mental health issues and really do a lot about actually how to identify and how to respond to them and just what resources are available. Then it will help people as they go on from university into adulthood.
I think that's one of the points that I picked up on in my manifesto, is that the exec training needed specifically for welfare officers is so important no matter what society it is. So whether it's something like sport where that like the winning and losing is the case, or like the stress of having games and having such a full schedule, whether it's enjoyable or not. Like I've been in societies and thought it's like the best thing ever, and then it kind of breaks the balance of you've enjoyed it so much that you can't stop it, all that sort of stuff. And if you have the welfare roles that are trained enough for these situations, it doesn't have to take an individual coming to the welfare officer. You can have the welfare officer say at the start of the year, or like have different drop-in sessions or something like that, and say like, hey, you can come to me about different issues before they become issues, sort of thing.
Now, this is a very specific question, which is what I'm trying to avoid in these more sort of discussion, debatey type formats. But I've got to ask, talking about this, quite a lot of societies have got a welfare officer, but right now the requirements for a society, a a president, a chairperson, or a general secretary, and a treasurer. Do you think it could make sense to have a requirement for a welfare officer as well? Is that a sensible idea, do you think?
I think it's something to be discussed, absolutely. I'd argue welfare officers are just as important as social secretaries, whatever they're called. Especially, I mean, if it's a smaller society, like I know some that are literally just those 3 or 4 positions, and maybe that is enough in that case. But even then, it would mean the president would have, or one of those 3 or 4 positions would have to be trained in welfare to some extent to be able to pass on and signpost further.
I mean, in my manifesto is something which I say is I want all societies to have someone who's trained in mental health training, because it is really important, because, you know, it is something which affects every student and is, you know, more of an issue now. Particularly, we talk about it a lot more now than we have in the past. And I feel like something that, to aid that discussion, we should have a wellbeing officer, or a welfare officer, or a mental health officer, whatever you want to call them. But I think it's really important that we do have them, just because they can sort of just be more proactive in the way they deal with welfare issues. Because currently all of the resources we have are very reactive. It's based on, you know, someone comes to us with a problem, we'll deal with it. But having someone who's just got enough training to actually spot if someone's got an issue and just proactively go and talk to them, I think we'll have we'll see like a massive impact.
And is there like a different aspect to the role of wellbeing officer which maybe we've not considered or we've not talked about so far, because it is a really big role? Like, are the different parts of the job which you're looking forward to or thinking could be a challenge? You know, it's kind of a tricky question. I know.
I mean, as you say, absolutely. There's so many different aspects to the job. Like, never mind what you're actually doing, like whether it's like a meeting or like going to, I think Josh is here on the council as well as just doing his regular sort of meetings. But in terms of areas as well, it's not just, as we've discussed, like mental health. It's like night out support and, I mean, trainings as well, as we said. There's like even more than that, there's like renting rights and all that sort of stuff. It's such a broad scope of thing. I'm really excited, to be honest. I just like to help people, and I've done that as part of a JCR, like building these communities and building different connections amongst people when they're feeling lonely, especially, is so important.
Yeah, I mean, like, it's got one of the broadest scopes of all the officer positions. There is such a great deal considering well-being, you know, whether it's planning events like Welcome Week to, you know, mental health resources, it's all considered within it. So I'm really interested and excited to just get involved with all of it, because I think there's so many different areas that it's going to be interesting to obviously learn more about them in the role and like how the Students' Union goes about in running all of them, but also just generally about, you know, helping people out. I mean, much like Ellis said, I think a lot of people who aren't JCRs are there because we really want to help people out, and, you know, that's something I definitely want to do. Is, you know, through all of our policy ideas are about helping people out. So, you know, I'm really excited to help students and just give them a more positive experience of university.
Well, thank you both for coming on to have a chat. I'm sorry, I know the times have still been a little bit disrupted because of the fire alarm before. It was a bit of a surprise to all of us, yeah. So these two and Oliver as well are all in the race for Wellbeing Officer. You can read all of the manifestos, as I said before, on the Lancaster Students' Union website. That's lancastersu.co.uk. If you come along to the private dining room in County South, 6 p.m. on Monday, there's the candidates question evening. You can ask questions to the candidates in person. There's a form you can fill out online if you just want to put your questions in ahead of time, and you can watch the stream on LA1. You can listen in on Bailrigg FM. And voting will be open from Tuesday until Thursday. If you stay tuned, we'll have the education officers coming up next, so stick around for that, and we'll see you in a couple of minutes' time. Thank you very much. I'm here now with our education candidates. We've got Tom Cross, we have got Josh Julian, we have Harrison Stewart. We unfortunately don't have Hussein Guliev, who can't make it today, I'm told, due to his geography degree, he's out of the country, unfortunately. But if we go to the three of you, first of all, education, it's maybe the most kind of intact role with the reshuffle of officers, but Harrison, you're approaching this from a different role, so how are we all feeling about the role of education? It's a broad question, but let's start there maybe.
Yeah, I can go first. Yeah, so I'm a full-time officer at the moment, so I've been involved in the officer restructure. My role of Vice President Union Development has been sort of melted away into different bits of officer roles and now team remits as well. But like you say, education is on paper the most intact. However, there is quite a bit of change to the education role. So across the roles, what we found on the full-time officer team this year is that we meet with the university far too regularly, actually, in different committees that will not benefit the student body, such as, you know, honorary degrees committees. No one wants us there. You know, we don't have enough time as it is. We need to be in committees that are going to benefit you guys. It's the same with education. A lot of committees that the education officer does not need to go in, we sort of scrap now, so it has changed. We've actually given the education officer a lot more time.
And how are both of you two feeling about these changes? Are you feeling good about them, feeling bad about them?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, also, obviously, there's the aspect of the shared responsibilities now. So, for example, that's why I put a big emphasis on cost of living, because it's important to education, but just structurally, it's great for the role. And also, it gives you the ability to give faculty reps a go if they want at sitting in those big meetings. They can stand in, they know what students think. It's just a great way to share responsibility.
Yeah, I kind of agree with what both of them have said, really. It is strange that they both ran for union development last year and are now running for education, again against each other. But the changes to the role aren't worrying me at all. I would like to see maybe more of the detail of what's changed. There's been a lot of kind of relatively surface level information out there, but I've got a lot of faith in our current FTO team and the decisions they've made as a collective.
Yeah, now if we jump onto the topic of faculty reps and academic reps, I know that the number of people taking up those positions, it can vary a lot depending on the department. How are we all feeling about the amount of input that academic reps have got at the moment, and what can we do to kind of improve engagement with that side of the university experience?
Do you want to go first this time, since you went?
Sure. So I've been an academic rep in all my years at Lancaster. I was a faculty rep at the end of last year. I'm lead rep for the Department of Engineering at the moment. And I think we're, as a university, quite good at saying we want to listen to reps. And at the Students' Union, FTOs are very good at seeing what reps think about their policies. The last faculty forum I was at was almost entirely FTOs broadcasting what they're trying to achieve and working out how much support there is for that amongst academic reps. And that's a fair point. We should be using academic reps as a resource, but actually there's not much support for those academic reps from the Students' Union. Your only meeting with LUSU is with a faculty rep in the room. You don't necessarily get any time with the FTOs as you used to, and there's no training after your introduction day. So you can end up quite isolated, and I think we need to do more to support our academic reps, and I think that would put up recruitment, and I think that would put up retainment.
Yeah, so yeah, I mean, I completely agree. A big part of my manifesto, especially my longer one, is full of stuff that we can do to make their lives better. So we can have a drop-in session like JCRs and welfare do. You can actually give them awards, a bit like JCRs do. We should be recognising the work they do, which is so difficult trying to extract concessions from universities and departments. And I think most importantly, give them training, because while the training they gave this year was great about sort of your vision as a student leader, about empowerment, it didn't tell you how to communicate with students, how to set up a social media account, how to work with the university. I think those are areas that we can do a lot better, and by doing that we can get more reps in, get more representation, and they get more skills for the future.
I completely agree with both of what you're saying. I think it's threefold. I think you've got recruitment is the first bit. I think the cohort of students that we've got at the moment are so engaged, so much more engaged than we have since the previous years we've had since COVID. Under my leadership at the colleges, we've had the biggest turnout in JCR engagement officers, so we've had more people signing up for that, and I'd love to become an education officer and implement what I've done in the colleges in the education space as well. I think it's also the training as well. It's not enough. We have training at the start, but I think one of you just picked up on that. It doesn't go forward. So in the colleges right now, we had training at the start, but myself and an SU staff member have now made it that media officers have more training as we go through the years, things like that. Stuff that I want to implement in the education sector as well. And awards, recognition. I think the Students' Union really lacks in recognising how much work goes into being a volunteer at Lancaster, and I'd love to make a better reward recognition for that.
Now, I talked to you all I talked to the two of you about this bit in your interview, but if I can throw out the S word, strikes, they'll probably happen next year, if not this academic year. What do we all think? Let's just leave it quite open.
In terms of, do we favour them? What do we do in response to them? What sort of...
All of that, what's your thoughts, Tom?
Well, as I've said to you before, I'm clear about this. I supported the strikes last year. In the long term, staff striking for better working conditions means that they can provide a better education. Once they are paid better, they're treated better. Obviously, postgraduate teaching students are members of the student union. We should be supporting them. I can't say I will always support a strike. It depends on the conditions they have and what they're fighting for. But in the main, I support it. Obviously, it depends what union assembly supports, because that's the mechanism that the SU uses to whether to support strikes or not. One of the big things in my manifesto is a strike action plan, because whether I support them or not, we should be supporting students first and foremost. So that means having a checklist of things we do to make sure students are supported. That means giving them warm spaces on campus. That means telling them what is going on. And it means encouraging the university to put resources on Moodle or other areas like the library, so they can keep up their learning even if their staff aren't teaching them.
On a similar note, as I said in my interview with you, I can't support a ballot I haven't read if it's not been written. I support trade unions generally. As an academic rep, you're essentially a trade unionist for the students that elect you. I think there are some things that strikes can struggle to deal with as longer term, more structural problems in how we fund education generally. I think one of the things we don't do much of as a students' union is talking about strikes after they've happened. When there's a crisis, normally a VP for education will come in, calm the situation, reassure students, and try and make the situation feel better. But after they happen, everyone just moves on. And actually, when you look at the marking and assessment boycott and previous strikes, we've actually had quite a lot over the last few years. I think you're right, I think we are likely to have more. I'm not sure that will be in the next 12 months or not. But I think we do need to look at how previous strike action and industrial action has affected us and actually work out where students feel they need more support.
I completely support the right to strike, and I too have supported strikes in the past. However, I think there is an extent that we have to go to. We have to balance the right to strike and our tutors and lecturers' right to strike, but also the needs of our students. Under the market assessment boycott, there was a lot of detriment caused to students, and it's how far we do support them. Now, Union Assembly, under my new model of Union Assembly, has 50 of our most influential people on campus, and I would very much empower that assembly to make a decision on this, of which I would then support. But my personal view is that I completely support the right to strike, but it's to what extent. We've got to look after our students as well.
Yeah. Any more thoughts on what everybody's said, or just move straight on?
I would say within the problems that the UCU were trying to address in the last round of strikes, there are things that will be permanently ongoing, like pay. You have inflation every year, you want a pay rise above inflation, the university don't want to give you a pay rise above inflation, and that leads to that endless dilemma. Around things like working conditions and permanency and contracts, I think there are more permanent solutions that the UCU and the university need to find, and I think as a students' union there is more we can do to advocate for that, particularly on the part of our graduate teaching assistants that are ultimately students just like the rest of us.
I'll throw up a question a bit out of left field here. The past year or two has been some rhetoric from the government at times about trying to cut down the number of students who are taking useless degrees or degrees which seems less employable, might have less kind of practical benefit, maybe they're a bit more abstract than, say, engineering or something where you're working with your hands. What do we think about this as potential education officers? How do you all want to support all of the students at Lancaster University?
I'll take this one if I can. Yeah, I completely disagree with the rhetoric that there is a useless degree. I'm a law and politics student, and I'm lucky in the sense that my degree is viewed as very valuable, and that's one you can tell your parents about and they're proud of. But I envy my housemates. Two of my housemates are in the Faculty of Arts Social Science. One of them's fine art, and one of them's theatre and creative writing. And I envy their talents. Whilst I might be good at reading and writing, I could never do the things that they pull off week in, week out. I absolutely hate the fact that that's sort of hated on, particularly at government level. That these people should be inspired to pursue their passions. And I think, why would I value one student over their course over another? I just think that's really blatantly stupid.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree. I've got a housemate that does film and creative writing. He's amazing. It's incredible what he can do and come up with, and the idea that somehow the arts are not essential to life, it is ridiculous. Where would I be without being able to watch classic episodes of Doctor Who? I would be lost. But no, and I read a book recently, and that basically said the arts industries are crying out for more people and for more funding. So I live near Bristol. They've got a brilliant community there, and they're still looking for more funding, more people on a more national level. Britain is actually quite a world leader when it comes to music and film and television compared to its size. So it absolutely is essential, and it's just a part of their war on woke and useless degrees, which is absolutely rubbish.
Building on what both of them have said, I think, we say, engineering versus arts. I was looking at the design degree we offer here at Lancaster, and actually a lot of their coursework uses the same software and the same skills that we use when we design all sorts of things in engineering. I do think there are ways in terms of curriculum transformation that we can look at how degrees benefit people. I'm not sure the conventional approach does suit some areas, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't be supporting the students because we don't like the way they get assessed. And at the end of the day, we're all people. Most of the problems students face are to do with finance, mental health, cost of living, and are things that aren't directly related to where they're going to end up.
The big phrase which has been around the last few years that dominates every discussion in student politics is cost of living. And when it comes to education, it might seem like one of the roles was kind of less direct impact of that. But Josh, you've raised in your manifesto the hidden costs that can be to education of by things like textbooks. If you're a film student, there can be costs associated with making your projects. How do we work to address the hidden costs to education at Lancaster University?
So, I think you, as the Students' Union, you can start with talking about this, because I think as soon as you start talking about it, you might find in some departments some hidden costs, suddenly the money's available. But I also think that you can have you can make a lot of progress on supporting students. If people know things are coming, it's easier to plan, it's easier to manage things. And I think the Students' Union can put pressure on the university to say that when you pay £9,000 a year if you're a home student, more if you're an international student, that should cover the cost of your degree.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree, and you can tie it in with AI, which another candidate has been very keen on mentioning, that it's just going to increase the attainment gap. If you can afford new, better AI, like new versions of ChatGPT, you are going to do better than other students if you're using it, whether that's for writing the essay, in terms of critical thinking, which I personally believe is wrong, but in there like research, I agree, where it's very useful. It gives you a leg up, and I think that's wrong for us to allow to happen. So you'd have to go to university, say, look, do you want students to do worse? Do you want there to be a worse retainment of students after the start of the year? But it's also the same with laptops and computers. If you go to the library between 9 a.m. and 9 p.m, chances are you won't find a computer there to actually be able to use. So they have got to expand that, or people will not be able to do their degrees. It's in their interest and it's in our interest.
Yeah, I'm really glad you brought up that particular manifesto point. I did actually smile when I saw that. When I was president of Cartmel before I was a full-time officer at LUSU, I fought for grants for that exact thing, for art students and film students, for example, that have degrees that are much more expensive than other degrees. And I managed to secure some funding for that. And when I saw that, I was like, oh, that's one of mine, nice. And yeah, I do think genuinely, from an education officer's point of view, because you're a full-time officer, the things that you want to implement should be more holistic, and I think we should really tackle cost of living in a broader sense. We should be fighting for the University Council and all the other committees to begin much more holistic cost of living proposals forward. Things like the supper club that we've managed to secure some funding for this year. Frankly, it's not good enough. Now, we've got the subclub and that's fantastic, but the university is refusing to give us a long-term plan on that. The university is not giving us any money for the breakfast club, which was so popular last year. There's so many things that I'm so sort of fired and passionate because of my time as an officer this year that I really want to fight for next year as well, and I think they could just do so much more.
Now, it seems kind of a shame to raise this issue without just saying here, but Tommy mentioned the issue of AI, and obviously AI in education, that's year and a half has been kind of a massive issue. We got that big scare last academic year with ChatGPT and the fears that everyone's just writing all of their essays with that. How do we all feel about the use of AI as an educational tool? How do we think the university should be addressing it?
So it's something I've consistently brought up with my department. I've been annoying the current VP Education, Sam Hedges, on an almost weekly basis about it. And so with my department, I've pushed them to actually begin drafting an AI policy, which I'm very happy about. And yeah, there's several prongs to this. One, you've got to give actual guidance. You can't just go, no, it's plagiarism, because to some extent, yes, and some areas it absolutely is. But if you leave it at that, how do students know how to use it? Its disadvantages, when it can be used safely. So I went to one of the AI workshops and I spoke to a member of staff from the library. They put together a brilliant infographic on it, on how you could use it, how to do it safely. Something I've shared on the PPR Reps Instagram, although we're sadly only followed by about 2 people, where training might come in helpful and increase. So yeah, and as I've said before, you need to actually increase the amount of money that the university is willing to spend on students who are then able to use it.
Yeah, I was on the teaching committee during the AI kind of crisis, and it was eye-opening how kind of far behind the Faculty of Science and Technology teaching committee was. I think they've made progress. I mean, I saw some of that progress when I was there, but they were just not ready for what happened. And there were plenty of students that used it throughout their exams. And then the department went after them, tried to put them before the standing committee, the standing academic committee, for plagiarism. But actually, we have a rules-based system where you're meant to have a fair approach, where you get supported, you get corrected, and then you've got a number of chances to actually improve your record, rather than just sort of being thrown under the bus after not having enough support. I think AI can be very useful. I know lots of students that use it. I also don't want to live in a world where the doctors, lawyers and philosophers of tomorrow don't have any critical thinking skills. But I think the university should do more. I think the library's already doing some good work on this. I think the FTOs at the moment have got the right level of attention on this, and I would like to continue that if elected.
Yeah, I am, straight off the bat, I am in full support of AI use in education. I think there's so many different ways we can implement it into our educational system that will really revolutionise it. I think it's fantastic. Something that you learn so quickly as a full-time officer is that students, that we're given so much information, and it's actually really difficult to market individual things to students, but there is a way that you can do it, and I think the way that the university has marketed the use of AI, or told people about the rules around the use of AI, is really quite poor. I think it's not transparent enough. There isn't, a standard rule book on it as such, and I think there was a bit of fear-mongering, particularly in my last, all of our last exams, around the use of AI. I had a lot of friends, and myself particularly, when I was using using AI in different ways. Am I doing this right? Is this going to get me kicked off my course, for example? I think the university can be much more transparent and help students reduce their anxiety around AI so easily. So I think that's the first job of the education officer when it comes to AI.
See, on top of that, when it comes to students being accused of plagiarism or misusing AI and things like that, of course, they've got a right to representation from the students, even if it goes to like an academic board or a disciplinary tribunal. So there's kind of a burden on whoever the education officer is as well to make sure that you are supporting students, but at the same time, as you say, Josh, we've got to be careful because I'm sure we can all agree we still want the university to be a place where students are learning our critical thinking skills. Have we got thoughts on maybe specific limitations of AI? Is it sort of like Wikipedia back in the early 2000s where it seemed like this big wonderful thing that had everything, and everyone was being told never use Wikipedia, never cite Wikipedia?
I mean, it'll be different for every department because, science is so different to history, where I am, or that is so different to graphic design. But from my angle, from a humanities angle, I'm very, very certain that it should be used for research, that it should be used for structuring, but it should never be used to replace critical thinking. Use it to gather data, absolutely. Just like Wikipedia, it cuts down time. Obviously, you don't cite Wikipedia, but it's a very useful start. I mean, I'll be honest, I've used Wikipedia before in essays. But, I think people assume students are stupider than they are when they go, well, they'll just blindly put anything in there. No, when you use Wikipedia, you double check your source, you click on the link. If it doesn't exist, you don't use it. It's similar for AI, but we need to remind students consistently that it can make it up, and that's one of the reasons we need to give better direction to that. But one thing that I'm concerned about is there seems to be one rule for some academic staff and different for students. Some have been using AI to mark essays. And one, I'm not sure if that's in line with university policy, and if it is, the fact that it's been done so badly means it needs to change. But also, the idea that you have staff spending less time on it and then therefore giving back worse feedback for students is a massive mistake, and it's a waste of £9,000 then.
I'd agree with a lot of what you're saying. I think there's a lot the university could do to be more consistent. So in a lot of management degrees, you have a skills appendix at the bottom where you've got to list the tools you've used. So you've not necessarily done anything wrong, but if you've used AI tools to help you through your research, even something like Grammarly, you have to list it. Not so that you can be marked, but so they can kind of check how that's being used. I think that's something more departments could do, but it's also about having a kind of a common sense approach. I mean, I've been on engineering involves quite a lot of group work. I've been in plenty of group works where you get to the end, you're putting everything together, and then you realise actually, this does not read like it was written by a person. This is the most generic description of this work possible, and you start thinking actually, A, this is really poor quality, and B, I think we're going to get flagged if we submit this. So it's about working out where it can be used and where it can't be used, and I think there will be progress. I think there's things students do at the moment that in a few years' time we will be using AI to do, and I think we need to embrace that, but also about retaining the really valuable parts of our degree that you can't just hand over to a machine.
I agree with a lot of the things that you two are saying. I think AI is coming, and we shouldn't be scared of it, and we should really plan for it. And I think again, it's about that transparency piece and the marketing with the university. I think critical thinking, like we've all touched on, is such an integral part of academic life. I think critical thinking is sort of the most beautiful thing about university. We're all here for a reason. We all are. Well, hopefully, quite intelligent people. When we put pen to paper, the things that we're saying are really, really great things, and that shouldn't be taken away by a computer that isn't human. But the way that we do that properly, and the way that we still maintain critical thinking, should be helped and educated by the university. The university is here to educate us. Why isn't it well enough educating us how to use AI? We can still maintain a great level of critical thinking with AI. We just need more help with that. We need more transparency from the university of how we should navigate the use of AI.
Okay, I'd like to thank the three of you very, very much for coming on. If you want to see their manifestos, as well as Hussein's, who's also in the race for Education Officer, you can see those, as I'm saying at the end of all of these, on the Lancaster Students' Union website, lancastersu.co.uk. If you come down to the County South Private Dining Room at 6 p.m. on Monday, there'll be a candidate question time. You can ask questions in person, you can submit them ahead of time online, and you can watch those questions online on the LA1 TV stream, or you can listen along on Bailrigg FM. Voting will be open from Tuesday until Thursday, as with all of the roles, and if you stick around for a couple of minutes, we'll be back with the activities officers, so please do stay tuned for that. Thank you all very much again for coming on, and we'll see you in a couple of minutes' time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. We're back with our activities candidates. Unfortunately, Kyle Bailey can't make it, but we've got all the rest here. We have got Sky, we've got George, we've got Tom, and we have Jack. Now, to jump straight into the first question for you all, activities officer, new role. It's bringing sports and societies and media back under one umbrella position like it used to be years ago. some of you have got more society experience, some of you have got more sports experience, but I think the big question which either the sports people or the societies people are going to have, depending on who you are, is do you have enough experience with the other thing? So why don't we start this end and just go round. How are we all feeling about representing both societies and media and sports?
Yeah, I feel pretty confident. I've done a lot of sport, mainly through archery, but I've also done a fair bit of hockey, and then with societies I've done all sorts, living history, a lot of music, and dabbled in things like poetry and pagan sock as well. So I think I've got them largely covered.
Yeah, I'm actually really excited to tackle something new. I do come from the society's more background. I mean, I'm built for comfort rather than sport, I must admit. But I've been speaking to people. Jack's very kindly given me a meeting. I've spoken to him. I've been speaking to society members from sport, lacrosse, canoe. I've been hearing the issues they're having and thinking how we can overcome those. But in terms of general experience, I've served 2 years on execs and societies as president and general secretary. I've been a conductor in the music society, and I can't wait to tackle the role as a whole if I'm elected.
Yeah, so the general experience I have is mainly being on with JCR. I've not had experience as an exec on a sports society, but I have dabbled in sports. Last year I was members of one of the martial arts societies, which was on Jiu-Jitsu. I went to that in first term and then a bit in third term as well. So I've had a little bit of experience in participating in the sports societies, but I've spoken to Jack, like the other candidates. I'm pretty confident I can represent both societies and sports.
So I was actually a student when it was VP Activities. It's the first year that I started, and then obviously the last few years it's changed. And I had the great opportunity to be treasurer of LEXOC and other academic societies, and then president of our American football team, and then came into this role and I've loved doing this, and I've had great opportunity to help the societies team where I've been able to, and we've been able to do quite a lot of work with the sort of societies committee and the sport committee this year, and make sure that those sort of accountability committees and the process of how those committees work are in place. I think it's quite rare that you are going to get anyone that's had the experience of being in societies, in sport, in media groups, which is why there's always going to be preferential, sort of an individual preference to one or the other. I think it's just great that we have those accountability processes and measures, and that we sort of can rely on those committees to be there to hold the officer accountable for them.
A big part of what makes activities officer a really big job is that you're representing hundreds of student societies, hundreds of sports teams, and between all those groups that's thousands of different students, and you've got to be able to listen to all their concerns. You've got to be prepared to affiliate new societies, help old societies re-affiliate. There's a lot to the job, and there's a lot of interacting with lots and lots of different students. How do you think you'd all handle the more sort of personal, more social angle of the job?
Yeah, I think it's so the expansion of one role to then meet more groups of people is really exciting. I think that at the minute, either sport or the society's vice president roles, you have that opportunity to impact a smaller group of people, but generally the issues that come from a student group are pretty similar. I think between us we could probably all come up with pretty similar challenges that a student group's going to face, and in combining the roles, you're right, there's a lot more people, but it just means that the work that you do is going to have a greater impact. And for me at least, I've really enjoyed going down on Wednesdays and watching our sport clubs participate on a Wednesday afternoon. Great social aspect of it in just getting to know the people that you're impacting, and the expansion to more people is just it's quite exciting really.
Yeah, well, I've already sent out messages to loads of societies on Instagram and social media. I've been trying to find out what their concerns are. From the responses I've got, I've tried to construct some of my manifesto points around that, specifically with the re-affiliation process and the training for society execs. But I think if I got a role, one of the things I'd like to do is go down to each society. If there's enough time, I'd like to go and participate in some of what everyone does, find out what they're about, find out their concerns specific to what they do as a society. I'd like to be able to address everything that is brought up to me.
Yeah, I think you mentioned the social side of it. What I'm quite excited to do is really push for collaboration between societies and sports. I know that Wednesday just gone, there was the big night out in Sugar that had an absolute blend of societies, and for Sugar that was one of the most successful nights I've had in a long time. It was a big boost to the town, and that's one thing that societies have been saying. They want more collaboration, and I think if we can do more things like that, they get everybody involved. I think that's going to be one of the really exciting things that the activities officer can do. You're not separated into sports or societies anymore. That's going to combine everything, and I think that's really exciting to get everybody engaged in lots of things. I think you mentioned how you've got to represent so many different societies, hundreds of groups of people. One of my things is that I want to put in some unique frameworks to address them. Obviously, you've got to collaborate because people love that, but also they've got unique individual concerns. I've been speaking with media, and their concerns are completely different to sports, and societies that have other issues with sports. For example, sports often don't need to book rooms, I don't think, as much. I'm not too sure on that front, kind of individually, whereas societies often have room booking issues, there's clashes, there's issues that go on. So each individual kind of section there has their own concerns that need addressing. So whilst making sure there's a lot of collaboration between everyone and everyone's loving life here, I want to put in separate frameworks for sort of the 3 specific groups so that their issues can be best resolved.
So for me, I've had quite a lot of experience representing different sorts of people, from being a welfare officer on the LGBT forum to running the orchestra for best part of 2 years. I've had a lot of experience of kind of dealing with conflicts in different ways and kind of like listening to people, and very much like that's the focus. Like, yes, my personal opinions will obviously come into it, but it's also being able to kind of put that aside and say, what is going to benefit the society, what's going to benefit everyone, regardless of what I feel. And I think I'm quite good at sort of doing that, as well as like I've been quite good at sort of merging like different friend groups between societies and sport as well. So I've had a lot of my friends from living history join archery, for example, and like merging those different groups of people together in a way that's just kind of really friendly, and kind of take that forward and keep like societies and sport just really accessible and really like friendly and open to kind of anyone as possible.
If we jump, a bit more away from the personal, more onto opinions, positions, a barrier to entry. I keep on mentioning the cost of living crisis in this interview because it keeps on affecting students. Sports, societies, it can all be very, very expensive, and more students just don't have that kind of disposable income. So what are we all thinking about ways to help get as many students involved in sports and societies as possible, and really break down the kind of financial barriers to entry?
Yeah, definitely something that we've seen this year. Definitely an issue that's definitely been raised, and something which we've tried to address as a union. I've had quite a fantastic opportunity to create a pilot fund for sport, for access to sport this year. It's a project that I started in looking at what is the current access fund that we have for sport. Is it fit for purpose? The answer clearly was a no. You look at other institutions and what they do and the support they have just to access sport and activity, and it's phenomenal compared to what we have. So we went away. I re-evaluated what it was that students needed and which support they needed and where it should be focused. Created quite a good pilot program for the sport team to open for this term, and that program was then also open for the societies. And in using those pilots for this term, we can really build a strong case to establish them as institutional support for access to those groups. Particularly with like a combined activities role and access to activities fund is the demand is there for it. We've had hundreds of applications to these funds already, and definitely a piece of work that needs to be finished for next year to have it established.
Yeah. Well, Jack said a lot of the stuff that, like, obviously I've been thinking, and I assume everyone here has been thinking. But yeah, when I've looked at societies, I've looked at joining societies before. I've gone, whoa, that is expensive. I don't know if I'm going to be able to like carry on with this if I want to like partake and keep going for the rest of the year. But I think securing the society's access fund and delivering that, and being able to implement more sort of funding for people who can't necessarily afford equipment costs. There's obviously just the Sport Lancaster membership, and that is quite expensive as well. So being able to widen the society's access fund, being able to let more people sort of be involved in that would be a great benefit to everyone at the uni.
Yeah, I mean, I'm running like a 3-part slogan. So my first one is lower the bar, and that's all about lowering that bar to entry and really boosting accessibility. So I want to carry on the FTO's work currently of the Society Access Fund, because that's really important. There's quite a good chunk of money there split between societies and sports at the minute, which I think can be used really well. So that's got to carry on, I think, to make sure things are financially accessible to everybody. I learnt today as well that I think the sports team, or not the sports team, sorry, but Sport Lancaster, actually charged sport groups to use the courts, the pitches and stuff like that. I've been told we're probably one of the only unis in the country that are charged, or students are charged to use those. I can't tell you right now how that I will get rid of that or scrap it or reduce it, because I don't know enough there. But that's something I definitely want to look at. because that sounds like an absolute anomaly in the UK university system at the minute, that we're charging people to sort of use and train here. I think that's ludicrous when they represent the uni in such great ways. And again, looking towards the sports side of things, I've been really trying to get my head around sports because that's not where I'm coming from. But the sports review over the next few years should be implemented. I want to get student opinion involved in that so we can implement it sustainably. There's, I think, a 6-tier structure, I believe, which can potentially give more funding to societies and sports at the minute that compete at a high level. A lot of the dance societies, cheer, aren't getting much financial support where they do deserve it because they're representing the uni on a high level really well, bringing back trophies and stuff. So hopefully that can make things a bit more accessible to those people in the sports at the minute are slightly under-recognised.
Quite similar to what the others have already said, like continuing with the work of the Sports Access Fund, increasing that, increasing that as much as we possibly can, and also, like George mentioned as well, my policy of like trying to increase the funding to non-BUCS sports, which kind of aren't prioritised as much because they're not part of BUCS, even though the fact that a lot of them are competing at the same level, if not possibly higher. I'd also try and push for things like the college sports societies, which are at a financial level a lot more accessible. I think a lot of them have either low, like known and like no membership fee, or they're very low, so trying to encourage societies and sports like that. So if they say they can't do one of the ones that are more expensive, well, what can they do? What would they also enjoy? And trying to push for those as well.
Now, can I come in with it a little bit? There's a lot of discussion around making sport a lot more cheap and like reducing a lot of financial barriers, which is something that we've looked at this year and like really tried to lobby the university to come up with ways of making it a lot cheaper. I think that when we talk about like the funding for BUCS teams, for example, and the offer that teams get, it's going to be very difficult to just suddenly remove a financial barrier from the university facilities, for example, to give free pitch bookings or free court space or whatever it may be. To be clear around the way that BUCS teams are funded, an individual within one of those teams will pay a £65 membership, the sport license fee that Thomas is talking about. That's not then wasted. The money that team will then get comes from each of those individuals paying for that. So I think that when we talk about increasing financial support for our teams and for our societies as well, it's really important that we're realistic about the approach that we take and the conversations we have with the sports centre, because at the end of the day, we can't just make everything free, make everything cheap. We'd like to, but there's no tangible way to just remove the cost of like a pitch booking or to take a team down to Nottingham for competition without stretching the budget as it already is. And like George, as you say, the introduction of the new the sport model that's going to come ahead come September should hopefully give more of a clarity and more of an offer to those groups. But definitely something that sort of wanted to mention there isn't bucket loads of money for BUCS teams and then nothing for everybody else. It comes from somewhere, and if we want to financially support other groups, then we're going to have to find that from somewhere else.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree. I'm not promising anything. Like you say, it's really hard to... money's got to come from somewhere. If it's being taken from here, it's going to there. It's all a big sort of pie game, who gets the bigger slice. Obviously, I don't want to cut money anywhere. But obviously, if people are paying these Sport Lancaster fees anyway in BUCS teams, from what I hear, and I've gathered from other people in the SU, a lot of other unis don't charge for those courts and stuff, even BUCS teams, I don't think. So I think, I'm not saying we can do it, I'm saying I want to look at it to see what options there are available. And again, on my point of trying to help non-BUCS teams that are competing at similar national levels, again, I'm not saying that they need the full BUCS treatment, they need that 5-star treatment. I just really want to look at if there is a way, potentially, that we can give them a little bit more support. It might not be possible, I'm not promising anything, but I am promising to look into it at least.
Yeah, I've got more thoughts on this.
I think in general, just all societies and sports teams, we should look at other alternative ways of being able to provide funding, because obviously all of it can't come from LUSU, all of it can't be covered from like LUSU and from the uni. Some of that is going to have to come out of members, or possibly past members, donations, looking at getting more sponsorships and like having a proper guideline on sponsorship agreements for societies, because one of the things that I've been looking at is trying to have like a society's donation fund, because past like alumni of the uni are often a lot of them have sort of ties with the uni still, and still have like a feeling, maybe like a drive to be able to still help the students that are there, like from their past societies, from their past colleges. There's still students who, or there's past members of colleges who donate to the colleges, such as like with the County 1000. So I think that alternative routes of gaining funding for societies for them to be able to do the things that they want to do is definitely something worth looking into.
I think with me as well, like similar to what's just been said, but like looking at possible fundraising opportunities as well. For the different societies, like trying to reach out to alumni and older member and like past members to say, do you want to, try and give a little bit of something back, and then potentially set up a framework in order to help societies and sports to do that themselves, so that, because obviously there's a big undertaking for the SU to do that, but if we were to have some sort of guidance to say, here are some ideas of how you can help raise money for your individual society, it kind of spreads out the workload a little bit. But also gives that kind of equal framework to how societies can maybe raise some funds for things like sending people to competitions.
Now, part of the activities officer role is roses, and of course it's supposed to be a bit more hands-off for the activities officer, and you leave it to kind of the full paid staff there. But to look at the kind of bigger picture of roses in terms of who's involved and how we can get more people involved, there's been the question of, well, especially with the activities officer role making its return, could we get more societies involved in roses? Is that something people would be interested in? And what are people's thoughts on kind of roses participation more generally?
Yeah,
I'm interested to hear everyone else's.
So with a lot of international sporting competitions, they will often give out programmes where they have a really clear timetable of what events happening, when and where, and my idea would be to kind of use some of those ideas and set up a roses one, because I think there have been issues of it done in the past, but if there have been more recent ones, I've not been aware of them. So trying to set up something that's really clear, and then within that as well also have really clear instructions of how to access transport, whether you're a York student or a Lancaster student, how do you access that transport, and kind of how do you go about that, as well as and also the issue with roses a little bit is that you can only have a certain amount of sports competing because of limited numbers and limited time, and I think there's the potential to have get more societies involved with performances maybe between sporting events, for example, and trying to approach the societies and get them more involved in roses that way.
Yeah, I think societies can definitely be more involved. I think one of the issues is when I was serving exec, I was sort of tasked with trying to engage with York to see if they want to do a collaboration on a non-sport thing, and they were quite reluctant to get involved and give as much there. So I think with York coming here this year, if we can set up a good framework to show them how it used to be, where more societies were involved, they can hopefully reciprocate that next year. Obviously, you say it's often left to the full-time sports staff to organise a lot of it. Well, obviously, is the political role there. I'll be there to take on any concerns all the sports team have, to then take those to the full-time staff, so that we can lobby to try and get things that all the sports team are happy with and address any concerns they have. And I'm aware that last year there was a big issue with how media were treated. They were often overlooked and a lot of issues arose. So I really want to nail those down to get those resolved. So when York come here this year, obviously we treat everybody the same, Lancaster and York. We show them how it should be done properly. So any issues that occurred last year that I've heard of don't happen this year, and York know how to avoid those issues, so that when we go back to York the next year, they've learnt from us. And we're the bigger man. Not only do we win, but
I'll jump in there quickly and just say, as someone who wasn't involved in roses last year, but obviously is involved in student media, and there's a lot of people from student media who were involved in that. The problems which people in student media faced were predominantly not the fault of York Students' Union. The blame from student media fell, for the most part, on Lancaster's Students' Union. I'll just point that out.
Okay.
But,
it really doesn't matter where the blame's going. It's not great. It's a collaborative event. But like I say, it's coming here this year, so if we can fix all of those issues, A, we've corrected what went wrong last year, and B, we know how to do it again in the future so that those wrongs don't happen again.
Yeah, so generally I love getting involved with things and developing ideas and stuff. Outside of university, I have a strong passion for martial arts. I've been doing karate for many years. I also have a passion for creative media and creating designs, graphic designs. I love music, all the above. So I would love to see a wider range of societies, media societies, sports societies, but also performance-based societies being involved in Roses. I know there are currently plans to have live musicians and sort of possibly acts from student bands to be put on Roses between games. I'd love to see more societies being able to access that, maybe like dance performances, things like that. And also on the martial arts aspect, I remember last year being very excited about being able to go and watch some martial arts that had recently been added to the Roses competition. But I feel like that could be further expanded. I know there's going to be issues with safeguarding and risk assessment for that. But at the same time, these martial arts societies are competing in competitions all over the UK outside of Roses. So given that they can already compete in these prestigious competitions outside of Roses, why can't they compete in Roses as well? Why can't we expand Roses to accommodate more sports teams, societies and media teams?
Yeah, to address sort of like the full package here, the way we've approached Roses this year was similar to the way we approached it in 2022. Roses 2022 was probably the biggest Roses in history, and this year we have the most amount of fixtures. We've got 140 fixtures this year, which means the most amount of society participation as Roses fixtures are going ahead this year. We have done a lot of work with the student media team this year, so I've sat down with the Roses student media leads and made sure we address the issues that have obviously happened in the past and made sure that those creases are ironed out and we're working together and it really is a true collaboration. I think so far it's going all right. Obviously Roses is 9 weeks away now, so we'll see how it goes in 9 weeks' time, but I'm really happy to say that work's going really well and I'm quite proud of what we've done so far and what will come. To answer your question, I've been on the Roses Committee for the last 3 years. The Roses Constitution is 60 pages long, it's about 14,000 words. It's well established and it really protects what Roses is as a competition and how we can approach the varsity that we have, the biggest inter-university varsity in Europe, and the protection that we have around who participates in Roses and making it such a special thing. With increase in participation of societies in Roses, we've done it in the past and we'll follow the constitution which is laid out, but then we have to make sure that those competitions which are going ahead in Roses are meeting the criteria that are in the constitution, that are prestigious, that do hold proper competition. And like you say, martial arts, for example, right? So last year there was a mixed martial arts event because martial arts is an individual competition and Roses we strive for it to be team competition. So there was a martial arts in 2023 in York was a mixed martial arts event, and then within that there were sort of individual competitions of martial arts. When we went to York, one of York's martial arts teams dropped out, so then there was only one martial art group, and then when we came to look at the applications for fixtures this year, each martial art group had submitted its own individual application rather than the format that we had last year. And when we're looking at Rose applications, we want to make sure that it's a sustainable format that we can see each year, that we're encouraging people to come along each year. Martial arts is really, really tricky for that to happen. We have individuals that come in each year that don't then match up in weight class and stuff. So where we can and where we have, we really encourage it to happen. And where applications haven't been successful, we've sat down with each of them, we've given the opportunity to talk through the Roses Committee discussion and the decision that they made, and then really work with those groups to bring a successful application in the future. Something this year, particularly around our sustainability aspect of Roses, we're looking to do a lot more digital content, so like a digital programme, working with the student media teams to make sure that their delivery of what they do, which is absolutely phenomenal, is sort of tipped up and works properly, and really maintain that home advantage that we do have. Like Lancaster absolutely loves Roses, they love it more than York does. I think we all know that, and we do a great job each year. I'm really proud to say that this Roses will be, in terms of fixtures, the biggest it ever has been. And think that, mixed bag of nerves and excitement for it, but definitely we've made strides to improve, particularly the involvement of societies, sport events at Roses, and again, highlighting that student media aspect, something that I've made sure to prioritise this year and definitely needs to happen in the future.
I think, sorry, can I just come in quickly? Obviously, like, I think we all respect that Roses is prestigious for, it's got this constitution that X, Y and Z is what makes Roses Roses, it makes it competitive. I think we don't necessarily want to be changing that and getting societies in, but I think even if they're not being like awarded points and in competitive fixtures, I think it would be really great just to get societies involved, even if it's not competitive, but just collaboration with York. They meet more students, it gives them more performance opportunities, and it just gets everybody more involved in that whole Roses thing. I know particularly for me, I felt Roses was like this thing that I don't do sports, I can't do it. I've then heard of years before I got here where sort of comedy society, music, other sort of performance societies were involved, but not in a competitive way. It just provided another opportunity for them to collaborate with other people, meet new people, and just get themselves out there again.
I suppose leaning on from that as well, like you have a lot of competitions as well, like across the world that also have exhibition matches. So you could have a lot of sports teams that maybe can't make the official Roses programme, but you could say we're not going to compete for points. And I'm aware that some of this does happen within Roses already, but you could extend that to say this is our purely exhibition like programme and have that almost like have it within the main Roses programme, but have it set up a little bit differently to say come along and watch. Maybe this is a sport that you haven't heard of before. Maybe it's something like octopus. Come and watch us. And kind of increase those opportunities for also those sports as well that like people won't have heard of and might be more interested to like know more about.
Yeah, I mean, like we introduced 18 new exhibition fixtures this year, which are all pretty unique and all, you know, the showcase that we have and the diversity of sports that we have and diversity of society groups that we have at Roses this year is more than ever that we have done before. We're also at the point where facilities are maxed out now. We're at 9 AM till sometimes midnight, and it's like back to back to back to back to back. It's very difficult to introduce some more difference and more variety in what we have, and I think we've struck a really good balance this year of it, and let's see what's there this year.
Can I jump in quickly? Yeah, I just want to bring up, is there a possibility that like Roses could be expanded to cover more of campus, so there's more exhibition things happening, maybe like in, so it's County South Theatre, there's a George Fox foyer, they're often used by martial arts for like doing their practice and stuff. Is it not an opportunity for more societies to have showcases in areas such as those during Roses?
Yeah, it's a possibility.
Now, I hate to cut off a lively debate that was starting to run out of time here, so I'd like to say thank you to all of you for coming on. Once again, you can see all of the manifestos for all of these four, plus Kyle Bailey, who's also running for Activities Officer, on the Lancaster Students' Union website. That's lancastersu.co.uk. You can come along to the candidate questions Monday, 6 PM, the private dining room in County South. Ask your questions in person. You can submit forms ahead of time. You can watch online the LO on TV stream. You can watch, or you can listen along on Bailrigg FM, and voting will be open from Tuesday until Thursday. Stay tuned, we'll be back in a couple of minutes with the presidential debate, which will be our final one for the evening, so do stick around for that. And thank you all again for coming on.
Thanks, Jason.
Thank you, Bob.
Cheers.
We're here for the final debate of this evening, the presidential debate. Joining us for this one, we have Cerys Evans, who's the current LUSU president, and Matthew Lamb, who's the current VP for Media and Comms at Pendle College. Also in the race, we have Nathan Mooney, Shlok Sagar, and Owen Kopak, who unfortunately couldn't make it this evening, but it's very, very good to have the two of you here. So, where to start? You know, it's kind of an interesting matchup, this, because we've got Cerys, you're the incumbent, and Matthew, you've come into this race as a bit of like an outsider candidate, opposing a lot of loose bureaucracy, so we've maybe got a combination like the most insider, most outsider. So why don't we begin with just attitudes to LUSU as a whole? Matthew, you've been talking about wanting to balance the budget, making sure that the financials are all in order. Why don't we start there? Cerys, what are your thoughts on the financial state of LUSU as someone who probably has a better idea than most?
Yeah, absolutely. So a little bit of context, everyone. So as president this year, I'm also the director of our commercial subsidiaries. So LUSU Housing, which is the sort of landlords that not landlords, but the estate agents that we have on campus, and also LUSU Services, which covers LUSU Shop, formerly Central, and the Sugar House. We also do some sort of marketing, advertising stuff, which sits slightly separately. So so that's sort of my like official titles, if you like. As you know, I'm also a trustee on I'm the chair of the trustee board actually. So I have lots of commercially sensitive information up here, which obviously won't be sharing. But I can absolutely reflect on like the previous year's sort of annual report with you, and just say that actually I think LUSU's in a really strong financial position. You know, LUSU Housing, which was expected to make, we were concerned that it was going to make a loss, actually did turn a profit. The services that we deliver pay for the charitable work that we do. So there's sort of this misconception in some senses where it looks like if you only look at the charitable accounts, we're in a massive deficit every year because we are a charity. So we don't make money through the charity side, but we sort of pay for that using the income primarily from the Sugar House, and you can see that all laid out in our financial reports. So there is this sort of slight misunderstanding about a charity not having lots of money, but that's why we have these commercial subsidiaries, which pay for themselves and then pay for the charitable activity that we do, which we're really proud of. I think that one of the things we've done recently with the new strategic plan, which has been brought in under this team that we've got this year, is look at a phrase that gets brought up a lot, especially by the university, is about cutting your cloth. It's this idea that you can only do something based on the amount of resource that you have. So we've been looking at making sure that we're delivering stuff that A, we really believe in, B, fits within our values, our vision, our purpose, and C, we can afford to do. So it's not like LUSU is recklessly spending money on things. We actually take a lot of care and consideration. Some of the people that I work with, especially on the trustee board, who have expertise in financial areas, tell me that we're one of the most sort of fiscally risk-averse charities that they've worked with. So we really are very conscientious, very considered, and it makes me proud to be, chair of the trustee board, especially for that financial side, because we aren't making these sort of reckless decisions, and we're able to deliver very good service for very good value, and that is one of the reasons that LUSU has turned such a corner in recent years. I listened to, especially some of the interviews that you did with other candidates, and they were recounting stories where they felt really unheard, unrepresented, frustrated, and often talking actually about multiple years ago. Not necessarily yourself, Matthew, but with some of the other ones, and actually that we have really turned a corner this year. And I just wanted to highlight that I think, people are often left with what can be a little bit like emotional scars from their experiences with LUSU, with being mistreated, and we've been through some really difficult times, the near sale of sugar, famously, and some other sort of really difficult periods, but actually we've come out stronger. And I believe that is, I'd like to take a tiny bit of credit for my role as president, but largely it's our amazing staff, it's our trustee board who have more than 1 year. So yeah, I will shut up now, but that's what I see the landscape as being one that has been troubled, but this currently is actually much stronger.
So, Cerys, you also got Students' Union, which is profitable, which is financially conscious, and still delivers good value for money to students. Matthew, what do you think?
Well, perfect. I'm glad to hear that. But what we have to do is ensure that we can continue that and just ensure that we don't fall into any wasteful spending again. And we have to make sure that we keep the union's independence so that we cannot promise a bunch of extra spending for this. We have to be responsible, and I'm happy that's been heard here. So I think we do partly agree on that. We were saying before this debate, you know, we have to be realistic about what we commit to financially, and I think both of us do agree on that, and we're realistic.
And having seen, you know, all the candidates' manifestos, having seen the start of campaigning, are you both satisfied that what people are promising is realistic, is attainable, is affordable? How do we feel about that?
Should we go? Do we go?
Sure, I can go. Well, I understand that candidates want to do a lot, they want to be ambitious, but at the end of the day we have to be realistic, you know. Can we get a rent freeze on everything? I think that's going to be very difficult. You know, we have to be honest with our constituents and who elects us. We have to be honest to them and say, you know, we might not necessarily be able to do that. I will fight tooth and nail to be able to get that, but at the end of the day, we do have to be honest with the people who elect us.
Yeah, I think similarly, you know, I've been doing a bit of a mapping exercise, just looking at what all the candidates have been promising on their interviews, on their Instagrams, in their manifestos. And I think that there are some fantastic ideas, genuinely, and most good ideas require some amount of money. But there are some sort of general statements about, especially transportation and rent and these wider things, food on campus, which are absolutely worthy goals. And there's things that I was talking about last year. You can go back and listen to my old interviews if you want to hear a far less sort of cynical Keris. Well, not cynical, well-informed, but you know, I think things like the rent freeze is actually, you know, I don't like saying very nice things about myself. I'm quite poor at it, but it was a little bit of a miracle that I was able to do that. It took a lot of work, and that was only for a frighteningly small number of rooms, considering the amount of work needed. And part of that is to do with the sort of deals that the university has with external contractors. There's an article on the LUSU website that I wrote a while ago, which sort of goes into the profit margins of these groups, which, you know, I can't comment on the specifics of the deal, that wouldn't be appropriate, but the publicly available accounts show great profit from these private contractors. But we're in documented contracts for until sort of 2041. So discussion about wanting to change those, it just isn't possible. In a lot of ways, the university and the union to some extent, they are bureaucratic bodies. It's partly why some of your concern around the, you know, some of the language you use about this, it makes it feel like there's this precarious cliff we're about to fall off, where suddenly we might spend all our reserves, which are very healthy, and suddenly we'll fall into this great deficit. And actually, I think, you know, there are systems to prevent that. The president is important. I like to think that my job is important, that I've done it well, but actually, ultimately, I don't have that much power. I can't completely ruin the university with my ideas. And, you know, I came into the role at the beginning of last year, over summer, wanting to, you know, battle it out with Stagecoach. And as much as I have tried to do that and have made as much progress as possible, there is very little influence you can actually have beyond a certain scope. And I think that is part of what is so difficult about rerunning. You know, I'll admit there's absolutely advantages, but part of what is difficult is that you are ultimately making far more realistic promises. I would love to say that I can fight for rent freeze for all students, and hell, I'll fight for it, but I don't believe that it's possible, because I know the financial state of the university all too well.
Now, if we move on to, I talked about this a little bit with the education officers, but I think it's relevant to you two as well as presidential candidates. The S word, strikes. We have quite sort of an opposition of opinions here. Keris, you're fairly sympathetic. Matthew, you're the only candidate who's come out explicitly in opposition to the strikes. So how are we going to make this work?
Yeah.
If we start with you and your position, maybe Matthew.
Well, I think you all know my position on strikes at this point. I think we have to, ultimately, as the Students' Union, we have to stand up for students. Those are the people who represent us, those are the people who elect us. And in previous SU governments and right now with other candidates, respectively, they're not prepared to stand up for students in particular. They want to support strikes, which I believe is a detriment to students. I want to support students who want to go to their lectures. I believe that missing out on your lectures and still having to pay the same amount, is a disgrace at the end of the day because you're paying for a service you're not receiving. So, and it really just throws a punch right in people's faces when the SU is coming out saying we support these strikes when people are missing out.
Yeah, I mean, firstly, oh sorry, I'm touching things. Let me turn this off. Firstly, I want to say I completely understand that feeling. I mentioned briefly in my interview that I think potentially my cohort of students that I was part of was the most impacted by strikes starting in 2019. We had strikes all the way through COVID, strikes through COVID, strikes after COVID. It really was a relentless couple of years. And to the point where it's led to genuine legal battles that are currently making their way through the courts, and that are causing some concern in the sector if you sort of read online, and that's sort of because ultimately I'm going to make a short point and then I will return to the original point. You said a really interesting thing, Matthew. Let me see if I can find what you said. In your interview, I didn't write exactly the quote, but you said that maybe the university can't afford it, but ultimately they have to pay. Do you really think it's worth bankrupting Lancaster University so that you don't have to pay as much, essentially tax, because that's what student loans are, is a tax after you earn a certain amount. Most won't repay it in full. Do you really think that the best way to fight for the rights of education of students is by bankrupting the organisation that is giving you an education?
Well, I believe that if you pay your money, you've taken out that loan, the debt is now in your hands. You have to pay that back yourself, and ultimately you're still paying for a service you're not receiving, so we have to get that money back somehow. If you pay for a service you're not receiving in other industries, like if I pay for a Big Mac and I don't get my Big Mac, I want my money back. So it's the same with my lectures at the end of the day.
I mean, some of the sector leaders would argue that actually you're not really paying for a Big Mac. It's like you're going into McDonald's and asking to pay 75p for your Big Mac because it used to cost that. And that's the fault of ultimately the government. That's the way that the tuition fee system works. They haven't changed in the last goodness knows how many years. Ultimately, they're sort of estimated to be worth around 2/3 of what they were. Home students don't actually pay for their education. International students pay for their education, and international students probably suffered even more from strikes, especially during COVID. It's when many were unable to physically travel to campus. I think there is this perspective, understandably, of where students were paying for a service, and in some senses that's absolutely true. I think it's helpful sometimes for students to consider themselves service users when they're sort of referring to the university, but there is a bigger picture to this, and the bigger picture has to be what can the university realistically and reasonably do when confronted with strikes. They have to look at what is the underlying problem that's being raised. The pensions dispute has been resolved, but there's still an ongoing dispute over pay and working conditions. We know what the underlying issue is, and even below the underlying issue, we know that ultimately the problem is the funding for the higher education sector. Universities are kind of skint hilariously across the sector, and that's why they would argue that they can't pay their staff, that they can't implement better working conditions. And so if you're just addressing the surface level problem, which is students feeling that they've missed out on some of their education, which is terrible. No one wants to be at a university that's during disruption. No one wanted to be well, I mean, it depends on your opinion, but no one wanted to be at university during COVID. No one likes disruption, and that's what strikes are. They're disruptive. That's the point, because there is no other way for them to get across what they're struggling with. I think it's interesting that you often quote such sort of revolutionary leaders, but seem to dislike the idea of there being an actual revolution in higher education. I think it's such a shame because so many people are members of both the Students' Union and of UCU and of other unions, Unison and such, and that's because they're GTAs who have often really, really difficult working conditions and very, very low pay. You can't just ignore part of the people that you represent, and my feeling and my concern, to be completely transparent, with some of what I've seen is a sort of willingness to ignore sections of the student community who actually you do represent and you would represent if elected. Yeah, I don't know if you've
I would just like a quick rebuttal on that. If you are saying that you support strikes, you're actively punching a huge proportion of the student community. Postgraduate students, they are a small minority. They do make up a large point, but the majority are undergraduate students who are not members of the UCU. They're members of LUSU, and when LUSU goes out supporting strikes, it's who's on our side, who's on my side at the end of the day, and that's why I think that LUSU needs to actually stand up for the people they represent, which is ultimately the students in their studying capacity.
And LUSU, you're right if I come back, I don't know if you want to. And LUSU has always prioritised supporting the maintenance and consistency of students' education. We look back at the most recent marking assessment boycott from last summer. The no detriment policy actually did a great deal of helping students to graduate. We had single digit students who were adversely affected by the marking assessment boycott, and each of those cases is still awful and upsetting, and we supported them every step of the way. But on the whole, actually the union has been very, very good at working with the university and campaigning to the university to do better, to go further, to support students when these things happen. I don't know that we can just completely disagree. We wouldn't get anywhere. We could sit around at LUSU all day and go, these strikes are terrible and we don't support them, and students might feel that, yeah, I feel that too, but ultimately that wouldn't progress us towards any goals, because what students really want, I believe, is an institution that supports them through actual policy and reasonable decision making, rather than reactionary commentary on these sorts of issues. I think that there's this problem of perspective over what the important part is, and I believe that the important part is how we prepare and respond. There is a strong possibility that we could have a marking assessment boycott this year, and that's okay because we know what we'll do. We know what we did last year. We know that students supported it on the whole, and we had very few reports of students who didn't feel sort of happy with the way that was resolved ultimately. And I know that you talked a lot about sort of the silent students, and that is something that we absolutely need to take on board. We can't hear, well, I would love to be able to hear from every single student, but often that's really difficult to do. But I think strikes are a reality. We can shut our eyes and hide under the covers, or we can face them and say, do you know what? Conditions are really difficult right now. They're really difficult for lecturers, for professional services staff, for academics, and for graduate teaching assistants who are our students that we represent. And we can go, right, let's move forward. How can we support students as we have strikes? How can we tell them what they should do if they're affected? How can we tell them about their rights and making sure that they know what their right is in terms of assessment, in terms of qualification at the end of the year? I think that is a far better approach than just simply saying, I don't like strikes over and over again. I'd be really interested to hear what you would practically do if there were strikes.
Well, yes, the idea that I would just close my eyes and sit here like, well, we oppose strikes. No, I won't be doing that. I totally agree. We need the practical element. The opposing strikes is simply a question of narrative. We don't support this, but the practical elements, I think you and we can probably agree on that we have to ultimately sit around the table and try and resolve this issue for students. So I think we can find some common ground there. The issue is more on the actual narrative coming out of LUSU publicly in its media side.
Now, if we move on to a bit of a different issue you've talked about, the sort of progressive culture at universities and in the SU, and wanting to challenge that a bit. Matthew and Kevis, you're employed full time, you spend 40 hours a week in the students' union, so I'd imagine you're quite familiar with the culture. So what precise problems have you got with the problems, the cultural problems with the SU, Matthew?
Well, the cultural problem with the SU is that, forgive me, but the SU tends to have a reputation of just having one viewpoint, tending to be of a certain political persuasion, and I just really wanted to shake that up a bit. I accept people of all political persuasions. I will have if I'm lucky enough to be elected, I'll have 3 other FTOs, and they will have diverse range of opinions and views, and we should absolutely welcome all of that.
The SU is not we're not the biggest SU in the world, but we have dozens of staff members. We have a trustee board that currently has 14 members, I think. Trustee board's at 14 members. We have SLT from many different backgrounds and many different political persuasions, as you say. I think it is interesting to suggest that there is only one viewpoint. I think there are my feeling, and potentially I guess my prejudice might be that when you sit so far away from the spectrum of viewpoints that there are, it can feel like there is one, and I can understand how that might feel for yourself and for students who do feel so far removed from the spectrum of beliefs that a majority of students hold about various issues, which I would love to get into. I think it's incredibly difficult to say that progressivism is one thing, and I worry sometimes that word, that phrase, that general belief of it's gone too far is hiding a deeper rejection of some of the community that we have here. I just worry that is the belief that purely the thought worlds of people are too far, or is your belief that certain people have got to a point where they're not acceptable in community because that it's gone too far or it's uncomfortable? I found it incredibly difficult to watch certain parts of your interview. I think it's very difficult to see how queer students especially would feel comfortable being represented by someone who rejects the idea that pronouns exist.
Well, pronouns very much do exist. We see them all in our daily lives. But let me make this clear. I respect everyone. I respect everyone as human beings. I have no hatred towards anyone. So I just want to make that very clear right now. And as I said in my interview, my policy on pronouns is very clear. If you want to say them, say them. If you don't say them. And hopefully everyone can just be happy and coexist.
But as Kevis has pointed out, it's quite a broad term, progressivism. Now we're a bit short on time, and we'll end in a minute. But if you've got precise points, maybe what you're unhappy with the SU, how you feel maybe they treat students, or your kind of opinion or ideological persuasion, anything a bit more specific than just progressive ideology.
Absolutely. About the progressivism, it's not necessarily just the Students' Union, it's more of a culture on the university. For example, I dared to challenge the progressive consensus in my manifesto and in my posts, and I've been inundated and barraged with harassment from all sorts of people on this campus, some of which is absolutely disgraceful. So that's what I wanted to challenge when I stood for this election. I wanted to stand up for people who feel as though they're not represented, and people have come up to me and said, I really support what you're doing, but I'm afraid to support you because of the harassment that I could receive.
Are you pleased with, do you think you have done a good job at raising awareness and challenging that consensus? Are you pleased with what's happened? Or
When people argue and disagree, that's not something to celebrate, but I think I've expose something that's necessary, that if you speak out against something that isn't necessarily the current consensus and the current agreement, you will get harassed for that, which is very dangerous. What is university supposed to be? It's a place where ideas are supposed to flourish, freedom is supposed to go everywhere, and we have to have those hard debates at the end of the day, because university is about advancing everyone and just exploring ideas, because isn't that what university is about at the end of the day since the beginning of time?
Maybe a few quick last words.
Yeah. And to be clear, if if you're watching, that's not okay. No one should experience harassment at all, and I really encourage you to report that. We've got obviously the complaints email, the elections email, all those people. We can have a chat about afterwards if you want, but it's not okay for people to be harassed for their beliefs, and that's not ever something that I would defend or hope for. I think that it's important that we're able to have these conversations, and I think it's important that students feel able to raise these kinds of concerns, and I think that I would be extremely keen to hear from some of these students about how the concrete issues that they have. I think it's incredibly difficult for me to understand how I can do better. That's ultimately what I am taking away from all of these campaigns is what can I do better when I go back to my job, whether it be for 3 months or for 15 months. How can I be a better president? How can I better represent students? And you hear representing a community that feels unheard, but I want to hear them, and I won't harass you, I promise. But I struggle to see in any of the points and the specifics that are discussed how practically that can be addressed. It's frustrating. It's frustrating for everyone, I'm sure, because you want to be understood, you want to be heard, you want to feel that you're represented, as every student should be. I think it would be really helpful. I've got a Q&A on every single day on my Instagram. Please do use that as a space to tell me about the concerns that you have, whether you're concerned about the too much progressivism or the opposite. Your candidates, your ultimately your elected representatives should represent you. And they should be someone who you believe will listen to you when you have a problem, if you have a problem. And, regardless of what your viewpoint is, it's basically impossible for any one person to represent every viewpoint, but it's about voting for someone you believe will respect that viewpoint when you get there and that you would feel comfortable sharing with. And I believe that I'm someone who is safe for all viewpoints. But ultimately, I think, it's unacceptable that you're experiencing harassment, that anyone experiences harassment, and the highest concern of mine as the current president and potentially as the future president is for people feeling safe on campus and people feeling that they belong. That's what's important.
We're a little bit over here, but just quickly, Matthew, if you got any final thoughts.
Well, it's excellent to be here with you, Keris, and I'm just really here to stand up for students, and I'm a true passionate believer in standing up for students, because I just want everyone to be heard and everyone to feel respected. No matter how this election goes at the end of the day, I want to say to people, look, I've stood up for you, I've tried to fight for what I believe in, and hopefully at the end of this we can all come together and make a truly amazing SU.
Matthew, Kevis, thank you very much. If you want to vote for either of them, you can find the manifestos online on the Lancaster SU website. That's lancastersu.co.uk. There you can also find the manifestos of the other presidential candidates, Nathan Mooney, Shlok Sagar and Owen Kopak, who, as I say, couldn't make it here today. This is the final debate we have this evening, but the candidates will all be in person answering questions at 6 p.m. on Monday in County South Private Dining Room. You can come along in person. You'll be sick of me saying all this at this point. You can watch the LA1 TV stream of that. You can listen along on the radio on Bailrigg FM. Voting will be open online Tuesday to Thursday, and then there'll be the results night on Friday. So stick around. If you just want to hear a little bit more about what is going on, maybe see the results, you can follow Bailrigg FM on Instagram at Bailrigg_FM. We'll be posting the results on our social media as they come out. To everyone who's listened, I'd like to say a big thank you, especially those who were around earlier at the start of the programme when we had a bit of a fire alarm. I'd like to say thank you to everyone who's taken part. I'd like to say thank you to everyone who has worked on the crew. It's been a very busy afternoon for us here. So thank you very much all for watching, and Matthew and Kev, thank you again for being here. And we'll see you all very soon. Goodbye.